Have you ever felt the stinging heat of disrespect in a room full of people watching in silence? Picture this. You are sitting in first class, a seat you earned, only to be told you don't belong there. That is exactly what happened to Julianne Vance on Flight 404 to London. A wealthy socialite looked her up and down and demanded she move to the back, assuming Julianne was nothing more than a lucky upgrade. But what that passenger, and the crew, didn't know was that the woman they were humiliating wasn't just a passenger. She was the owner of the entire airline, and she was about to teach them a lesson that would cost them everything. The air inside the first-class cabin of Aerolux Airways, Flight 404, smelled of expensive leather and fresh orchids. It was the scent of exclusivity, a fragrance Julianne Vance knew well. She had, after all, personally selected the floral arrangements for the fleet during the brand refresh 3 years ago. Today, however, Julianne wasn't the untouchable CEO of Aerolux, the first black woman to lead a major transatlantic carrier in 2 decades. Today, she was just a passenger in seat 1A. She wore a simple charcoal hoodie, black leggings, and oversized sunglasses that hid her sharp, observant hazel eyes. Her hair was pulled back into a casual bun, and she tapped away on a cracked iPad, reviewing quarterly earning reports disguised as a generic e-book. She was flying incognito. It was her favorite way to gauge the true Aerolux experience. No red carpets, no fawning station managers, just the raw reality of her company's service. "Champagne, ma'am?" Julianne looked up. The flight attendant, a young man with a perfectly gelled side part named Marcus, hovered over her with a bottle of Dom Perignon. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. His gaze flickered briefly to her hoodie, then to the scuffed sneakers on her feet. It was a microaggression she was used to, the subtle check to see if she really belonged in the $12,000 seat. "Sparkling water, please, Marcus." "No ice," Julianne said softly. Marcus blinked, surprised she knew his name without looking at his tag, then nodded curtly. "Right away." He turned on his heel, his attention immediately captured by the commotion erupting at the cabin door. "Absolutely not. You have to be joking. Do you know who my husband is?" The voice was shrill, piercing the sophisticated silence of the cabin. A woman swept in, looking like she had been dipped in gold and rolled in diamonds. She wore a white tweed Chanel suit, carrying a Birkin bag that cost more than the average car. This was Clarissa Whitmore. Her reputation in New York circles was well known: old money, short temper, and a belief that the world existed solely to serve her. Behind her trailed a weary-looking personal assistant, loaded down with hat boxes and duty-free bags. Marcus rushed forward, his demeanor shifting instantly from dismissive to obsequious. "Mrs. Whitmore, welcome aboard. We are honored to have you flying Aerolux again." Clarissa didn't look at him. She stopped in the middle of the aisle, pulling her sunglasses down her nose to scan the cabin. Her eyes landed on seat 1A. Julianne felt the gaze. It was a physical weight. She didn't look up from her iPad, but her muscles tensed. "There must be a mistake," Clarissa announced loudly, pointing a manicured finger directly at Julianne. "That is my seat." Marcus looked at his manifest, panicked. "Apologies, Mrs. Whitmore. You are assigned to seat 2F. It's a lovely window seat on the right side, with the same—" "I don't care about the right side," Clarissa snapped. "I always sit in 1A. It's the bulkhead. I need the legroom for my bag, and I prefer the left side of the plane. The lighting is better for my skin care routine." "I understand, but—" "Marcus, darling." Clarissa stepped closer, lowering her voice to a theatrical whisper that everyone could still hear. "Look at who is sitting there. Clearly there's been a glitch in your upgrade system. That woman is obviously comfortable. But seat 1A is for your VIPs. I am a Platinum Legacy member. My husband plays golf with your VP of Operations, Richard Sterling. Shall I call Richard now? Julianne's fingers paused on the glass screen of her iPad. Richard Sterling. She knew Richard well. He was currently under investigation by her internal audit team for embezzlement, though he didn't know it yet. The fact that Clarissa was name-dropping him wasn't the flex she thought it was. Marcus swallowed hard. The threat of a call to corporate terrified the ground staff and crew. Please, Mrs. Whitmore, let me see what I can do. Please take seat 2F for just a moment. I will stand right here until you fix this, Clarissa said, crossing her arms. Marcus turned slowly toward Julianne. His face was pale. He approached seat 1A, kneeling so he was at eye level with her. Ma'am, Marcus said, his voice dripping with forced politeness. Julianne lowered her sunglasses. Yes, Marcus? We seem to have a slight situational conflict regarding seating arrangements. The passenger standing there requires the bulkhead for medical reasons. Julianne raised an eyebrow. Medical reasons? She just said she needed it for her bag and the lighting. Marcus flushed red. Well, it's a sensitive matter. We would like to ask if you would be willing to switch seats. We have a lovely seat in row 4. It's still business class, just further back. Julianne looked at row 4. It was near the galley. The noise would be constant, and it wasn't first class. It was business. It was a downgrade. I paid full fare for this seat, Marcus, Julianne said calmly. I selected 1A specifically. I understand that, ma'am, Marcus said, his voice hardening slightly. But Mrs. Whitmore is a Platinum Legacy partner. We try to accommodate our most loyal flyers. I am a loyal flyer too, Julianne said, her voice steady. And I am already seated. Clarissa, hearing the refusal, scoffed loudly. She marched over to 1A, looming over Julianne. Listen here, Clarissa spat. I don't know what kind of employee pass or lottery ticket got you this seat. But let's be real. You don't fit the demographic for 1A. People are trying to relax here. Why don't you take the free voucher this nice boy is going to give you and go sit where you'll be more comfortable? Maybe Economy Plus has some extra leg room. The cabin went silent. The racism wasn't even veiled. It was laid bare, ugly and arrogant. A businessman in 1F looked uncomfortable, but buried his face in the Financial Times. No one moved. Julianne looked Clarissa dead in the eye. I am comfortable right here, Mrs. Whitmore, and I suggest you sit down before the doors close. Clarissa's jaw dropped. She turned to Marcus, her face turning a violent shade of crimson. Get the purser. Now, I want this woman off the plane. The tension in the cabin was so thick, it felt like the oxygen levels had dropped. Marcus scrambled toward the cockpit to retrieve the lead purser, leaving Julianne and Clarissa in a silent standoff. Clarissa stood in the aisle, tapping her expensive heel, glaring at Julianne with pure venom. Julianne simply went back to her iPad, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. It wasn't fear. It was rage. A moment later, the curtain whipped open. Nancy, the lead purser, stepped through. Nancy was a veteran of Aerolux, a woman in her late 50s with a stiff blonde bob and a reputation for running a tight ship. Julianne recognized her file immediately. Nancy had 3 commendations for safety, but 5 complaints regarding attitude toward junior staff in the last year alone. Marcus whispered frantically in Nancy's ear, gesturing between Clarissa and Julianne. Nancy's eyes narrowed as she assessed the situation. She walked over to Clarissa first. Mrs. Whitmore, Nancy said, her voice smooth like syrup. I am so sorry for this disturbance. Marcus tells me we have a seating discrepancy. It's not a discrepancy, Nancy, Clarissa said, looking at the purser's name tag. It's an insult. I have flown this airline for 15 years. I have never been denied my preference. And to be told no by her? She waved a dismissive hand toward Julianne. It's unacceptable. I want her moved, or I want her removed for being disruptive. Disruptive? Julianne spoke up, her voice cool and authoritative. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't left my seat. The only person disrupting this flight is standing in the aisle. Nancy turned to Julianne. Her expression was cold. She didn't see a CIO. She saw a problem. She saw a young black woman in a hoodie causing a scene with a high-value donor. "Ma'am," Nancy said, dropping the customer service facade. "Let me be clear. The captain is preparing for departure. We cannot have arguments in the first-class cabin. Mrs. Whitmore is a priority passenger. We need to facilitate a seat swap to ensure the comfort of all our guests." "Does my comfort not matter?" Julianne asked. "I paid for this ticket. My money is green, just like hers." Nancy sighed, an impatient, rattling sound. "Ma'am, let's not make this about money. It's about protocol. We have the right to reassign seats for operational needs." "Operational needs?" Julianne laughed dryly. "Satisfying a tantrum is not an operational need, Nancy. It's a failure of leadership." Nancy stiffened. "Excuse me? You heard me? You are prioritizing a bully over a paying customer because you are afraid of her status. That is a violation of Aerolux's Equity and Service Policy, Section 4, Paragraph 2. Nancy blinked. She looked stunned that this passenger in leggings was quoting the employee handbook, but Clarissa wasn't having it. "Oh, look at you, a plain lawyer." Clarissa cackled cruelly. "Did you look that up on your little cracked screen? Nancy, get the captain. I'm not flying with her near me. I feel threatened. She's aggressive." "I agree," Nancy said, making a snap decision. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to grab your things. We are moving you to economy." "Economy?" Julianne asked, her voice dropping an octave. "A moment ago it was row 4. Row 4 is now taken," Nancy lied smoothly. "The flight is full. We have a seat in 34B. It's the last option. If you refuse, we will have airport security escort you off the plane for failing to comply with crew instructions." Julianne stared at Nancy. This was the precipice. This was the moment where the system broke. Nancy was willing to humiliate a passenger, downgrade her 5 classes, and threaten her with arrest, all to appease a woman in a Chanel suit. Julianne stood up. She was tall, 5'10", and even in sneakers, she held herself with a regal bearing that made Nancy take a subconscious step back. "Fine," Julianne said. "I will move." Clarissa smirked, a look of pure, toxic triumph. "Finally. Smart choice, honey. Know your place." Julianne reached into the overhead bin and pulled down her humble leather duffel bag. She didn't look defeated, though. She looked dangerous. She looked like a predator that had just decided to play with its food. "I will move to 34B," Julianne said, her voice projecting clearly through the silent cabin so that every passenger could hear. "But I want you to remember this moment, Nancy. And you, Mrs. Whitmore. I want you to remember that I gave you a chance to do the right thing. Just go," Clarissa waved her hand. "Stop making speeches." Julianne walked down the aisle. As she passed the business class section, heads turned. She passed premium economy. Finally, she reached the back of the plane, the cramped economy section where the air was stale and the seats were tight. She found seat 34B. It was a middle seat between a sweating man eating a tuna sandwich and a crying toddler. Julianne sat down. She didn't complain. She simply pulled out her phone. She wasn't checking emails anymore. She was texting the chief of operations at JFK. The text was short. Code black. Flight 404. "I am on board. Initiate Protocol V. Freeze the gate. Back in first class, Clarissa settled into seat 1A, sipping the champagne Marcus had poured for her. Much better, she sighed, kicking off her shoes. Some people just need to learn the hierarchy. Nancy smiled at her. Absolutely, Mrs. Whitmore. We are just glad to make you happy. The plane shuddered as the engines roared to life, but they didn't pull back from the gate. 5 minutes passed, then 10. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, but he didn't sound like he usually did. He sounded confused. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We have been ordered to hold at the gate by Aerolux Corporate HQ. We've been grounded immediately. Please remain in your seats. Clarissa frowned. Grounded? What for? In the back of the plane, in seat 34B, Julianne Vance smiled. The game had just begun. The silence in the cabin following the captain's announcement was heavy, the kind of silence that precedes a thunderstorm. The engines, which had been humming with the promise of a transatlantic journey, spooled down into a low, menacing whine before cutting out completely. The auxiliary power unit kicked in, a dull thrum that made the sudden lack of vibration feel unnatural. In seat 1A, Clarissa Whitmore drained her champagne flute and slammed it onto the coaster with a sharp clack. "This is ridiculous," she huffed, checking her diamond-encrusted watch. Nancy, what is going on? I have a dinner reservation at the Shard in London. If we miss our slot, I'm holding this airline personally responsible." Nancy, the lead purser, was currently standing in the galley, pressing a phone receiver to her ear, her face a mask of confusion. "Yes, Captain. But did they give a reason? A security threat? A mechanical issue?" She paused, listening, her knuckles turning white as she gripped the phone. "An executive override. I've been flying for 30 years, Captain. I've never heard of that code." She hung up the phone slowly. Her training told her to smile, to reassure the passengers, but a cold knot of dread was forming in her stomach. An executive override didn't come from air traffic control. It came from the boardroom. Nancy smoothed her skirt and stepped back into the first-class cabin. "Mrs. Whitmore, I apologize. The captain has been informed of a mandatory administrative hold. We are just waiting for paperwork. It should be momentary." "Administrative hold?" Clarissa scoffed, her voice carrying through the curtain to business class. "That sounds like incompetence to me. You people can't even manage a seating chart, so I suppose flying the plane is too much to ask." Marcus, the flight attendant who had moved Julianne, was trembling slightly as he refilled Clarissa's water. "I'm sure it's fine, Mrs. Whitmore. Just a formality." Meanwhile, 300 feet back, the atmosphere was vastly different. Seat 34B was a world away from the orchids and champagne of the front. The air here was stagnant. The man in 34A, a heavy-set construction worker named Bill, was trying to manage a tuna sandwich that was falling apart in his hands. To Julianne's right, in 34C, a young mother was bouncing a screaming toddler on her knee, tears of exhaustion welling in her own eyes. "I'm so sorry," the mother whispered to Julianne, looking terrified that this tall, elegant woman in the hoodie would yell at her. His ears hurt. I'm so sorry." Julianne Vance, the woman who owned the plane they were sitting on, turned to the mother. The cold, predator-like gaze she had given Clarissa was gone, replaced by a warmth that transformed her face. "Don't apologize," Julianne said softly. "Flying is hard on little ones. Do you have a bottle for him? The swallowing helps the pressure." I ran out of formula in the terminal," the mother stammered. "I was hoping to ask the flight attendants for some milk, but they haven't come by yet." Julianne's jaw tightened. They hadn't come by because they were too busy pampering the woman in 1A. "Bill," Julianne said, turning to the man on her left. Do you mind if I squeeze past you for a second? Bill, halfway through a bite of tuna, looked at her. We ain't allowed up, miss. Seatbelt sign is on. It's okay, Julianne said, unbuckling her belt. I'm just going to the galley. She stood up. The headroom in economy was low. She walked to the rear galley where 2 junior flight attendants were gossiping, scrolling through their phones, ignoring the call lights dinging above their heads. They looked up, annoyed, as Julianne approached. "Ma'am, you need to sit down," one of them snapped. The captain said, "I need a carton of milk, warmed." "And 2 cups," Julianne interrupted, her voice low, but laced with an authority that made the junior attendant pause. "And I need a bottle of water for the gentleman in 34A. "We aren't doing service yet," the attendant sighed, rolling her eyes. "We're grounded." Julianne leaned in. She didn't shout. She didn't make a scene. She simply looked at the attendant's name tag. Sarah. "Sarah," Julianne said. "There is a mother in 34C who has been distressed for 20 minutes. You are standing here talking about your weekend while a baby is screaming for food. Now you can either get me the milk, or you can explain to the lead purser why you refused a direct request for passenger aid during a delay." Sarah blinked. There was something about this woman, the posture, the diction. It didn't match the economy seat. Flustered, Sarah grabbed a carton of milk and a bottle of water. "Fine, here. But go sit down." Julianne took the items. "Thank you, Sarah. Work on your tone." She returned to her seat. She handed the water to Bill, who looked at it like it was gold bullion. "Thanks, lady. I was parched." Then she helped the mother mix the milk into a sippy cup. Within moments, the toddler was drinking greedily, the screaming replaced by contented gulps. The mother looked at Julianne with tear-filled eyes. "Thank you. You're an angel. I don't know why they moved you back here, but you're the nicest person I've met all day." "I'm just a passenger, like you," Julianne said, though her mind was racing. She pulled out her phone again. The signal bars were full. She opened her secure messaging app. "To Elias Thorne, Head of Global Security. Status? From Elias Thorne. We are breaching the jet bridge now. Ground crew has secured the stairs. Local police are on standby at the tarmac level. I have the General Counsel with me. To Elias Thorne. Good. I want a full extraction. And Elias, bring the termination papers. All of them." Julianne locked her phone and placed it face down on the tray table. She closed her eyes and listened. From the front of the plane, she could hear Clarissa's voice rising again, complaining about the temperature. Julianne took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of stale coffee and humanity. This was the reality of her airline. This was what her customers felt, and she was going to burn the rot out, starting from the head. The plane jolted, not from the engines, but from the sound of the main cabin door being unlatched from the outside. A hush fell over the cabin. The door wasn't supposed to open once the flight was sealed. Nancy's voice drifted over the intercom, shaky and uncertain. "Ladies and gentlemen, it appears we have some additional personnel boarding the aircraft. Please remain seated." Julianne opened her eyes. It was time. The first-class cabin was the first to witness the invasion. The heavy door swung open, revealing not a mechanic in a jumpsuit, nor a gate agent with a clipboard. Instead, 4 men walked onto the plane. They were dressed in immaculate, sharp-cut, dark suits that screamed corporate power. Leading them was Elias Thorne. Elias was a legend within Aerolux, though few low-level employees had ever seen his face. He was the head of global security, a former intelligence operative who moved with a terrifying, silent grace. Behind him was the General Counsel, clutching a thick black folio, followed by 2 stern-faced security officers. Nancy, the lead purser, felt her blood run cold. She smoothed her hair frantically and stepped forward, putting on her best smile. "Gentlemen," Nancy chirped, blocking the aisle. "I wasn't informed of any VIPs boarding. Mrs. Whitmore is in seat 1A, if you are here for her." Elias Thorne didn't even look at Nancy. He looked through her. He stepped around her as if she were a piece of furniture. "Make a hole," Elias said quietly to Marcus, who was standing in the aisle with a bottle of wine. Marcus practically jumped into an empty seat to get out of the way. Clarissa Whitmore, seeing the suits, sat up straighter. A smug smile spread across her face. "Finally," she said, loud enough for the cabin to hear. "Richard must have sent his people. It took you long enough. This crew has been absolutely dreadful." She extended a hand as Elias approached seat 1A. "I'm Clarissa Whitmore. I assume you're here to apologize for this delay and perhaps escort me to a private lounge while you fix the plane." Elias stopped. He looked down at Clarissa. His expression was made of stone. He didn't take her hand. He didn't speak to her. He simply paused for 1 second, his eyes scanning her face with a look of utter indifference, before he turned his head and continued walking down the aisle. Clarissa's hand was left hanging in the air. Her smile faltered. "Excuse me. Hello? I'm talking to you." Elias ignored her. The phalanx of suits marched past the first-class curtain. Nancy scrambled after them. Sirs! Where are you going? You can't just walk through the cabin. The business-class passengers are resting." The procession ignored her. They moved with a singular, terrifying purpose. They walked past the lie-flat seats of business class, where wealthy businessmen peered over their privacy dividers, confused. They walked past premium economy. They reached the curtain that separated the haves from the have-nots. Elias ripped the curtain back. The economy cabin fell silent. The sight of these 4 powerful men in the narrow, cramped aisle was jarring. It was like seeing sharks swimming in a goldfish bowl. They walked past row 10, row 20, row 30. Nancy was practically running now, panting. "Sirs, please, that is the back of the plane. There is nothing back there but the toilets and economy." Elias stopped at row 34. The entire plane was craning their necks. Clarissa had actually unbuckled and stepped into the aisle in first class, trying to see where her rescue team had gone. Elias Thorne turned to face the middle seat. He looked at the woman in the hoodie, sandwiched between Bill and the mother. The cabin held its breath. Elias bowed. It wasn't a nod. It was a formal, respectful bow from the waist. "Ms. Vance," Elias said, his voice clear and projecting in the silence. "My apologies for the delay in extraction. The perimeter is secured." Julianne Vance looked up from her tray table. She slowly unbuckled her seatbelt. The sound of the click was deafeningly loud in the quiet cabin. "Thank you, Elias," she said. Her voice was calm, but it carried a resonance of power that she had been hiding for the last hour. She turned to Bill. "Excuse me, Bill." Bill, eyes wide as saucers, pulled his legs in. "Holy." Yeah, go ahead." Julianne stood up. She stretched her legs. She looked at the young mother in 34C. "The flight will be cancelled, I'm afraid. But don't worry about your ticket. My assistant will be waiting at the gate to book you a hotel and a private car to your destination. You won't pay a dime." The mother gaped at her. Who are you?" Julianne smiled kindly at her, then turned her gaze to the aisle where Nancy was standing. Nancy's face had gone the color of ash. She was trembling so hard her teeth were almost chattering. She recognized the name now. Vance. Julianne Vance. The CEO. The owner. The woman who signed the paychecks. Julianne stepped out into the aisle. The general counsel immediately handed her a tablet. "The manifest, Miss Vance. the lawyer said. And the employment records for the crew of Flight 404. Excellent, Julianne said. She didn't look at the tablet. She looked at Nancy. Nancy, Julianne said, I believe you threatened to have security arrest me if I didn't move to seat 34B. Nancy couldn't speak. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Well, Julianne continued, taking a step forward, forcing Nancy to back up. Security is here. But they aren't here for me. Julianne began to walk toward the front of the plane. It was the reverse of her earlier walk of shame. This was a coronation. Elias and the security team fell in behind her, a protective wall of dark wool and muscle. As she passed through the cabin, passengers began to whisper. Is that the owner? That's Julianne Vance. I saw her on Forbes. They made the CEO sit in the middle seat? Julianne walked through business class. She reached the first-class cabin. Clarissa Whitmore was standing in the aisle, hands on her hips, looking furious but also confused. She saw Julianne approaching, flanked by the men she thought were there for her. What is this? Clarissa demanded, her voice shrill. Why are these men following you? You're the woman who stole my seat. Julianne stopped 3 feet from Clarissa. She took off her sunglasses slowly, folding them and handing them to Elias. Mrs. Whitmore, Julianne said, her voice ice-cold. You asked a question earlier. You asked if I knew who your husband was. Clarissa blinked. Yes, and you're about to be in big trouble when I call him. I know who he is, Julianne said. He is a partner at Sterling & Cooper, a firm that Aerolux pays roughly $10 million a year in retainer fees. Julianne turned to her general counsel. Robert, are we still under contract with Sterling & Cooper? The contract is up for renewal next month, Ms. Vance, the lawyer replied smoothly. Cancel it, Julianne said. Effective immediately. Cite conflict of interest due to personal misconduct of senior partner's family. Done, Robert said, tapping on his tablet. Clarissa's face dropped. You can't do that. You can't just... I can, Julianne said, stepping closer, because this is my plane, this is my airline, and you are currently trespassing on my property. Clarissa stumbled back, hitting the armrest of seat 1A. You own Aerolux? I do, Julianne whispered, and I have a zero-tolerance policy for racism, harassment, and entitlement. You struck out on all 3. Julianne turned to Marcus and Nancy, who were huddled by the galley, looking like they wanted to disappear through the floor. And you two, Julianne said, her voice dropping to a dangerous register. We need to have a very serious conversation about the definition of customer service. Miss Vance, please, Nancy sobbed, tears finally spilling over. I didn't know. If I had known, it was you. That, Julianne interrupted, pointing a finger at Nancy's chest, is exactly the problem. You treated me like garbage because you thought I was nobody. If you only treat people with respect when you think they have power, you have no integrity. Julianne turned to Elias. Elias, escort Mrs. Whitmore off my plane. Place her on the permanent no-fly list. Global ban. She doesn't fly Aerolux. She doesn't fly our partners. She can take a boat to London. With pleasure, Ms. Vance, Elias said. He moved toward Clarissa, who was now hyperventilating. And the crew? Elias asked. Julianne looked at Nancy and Marcus. The silence stretched for an eternity. Get them off the plane, Julianne said dismissively. I want a full tribunal in the boardroom in 1 hour. Until then, strip their badges. As Elias moved to grab Clarissa's arm and the security team moved toward the flight attendants, Julianne turned back to the stunned cabin of first-class passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, she announced, smoothing her hoodie. I apologize for the inconvenience. This flight is cancelled. However, A new aircraft is being prepped at Gate 12. Everyone on board today will receive a full refund and a voucher for a future round-trip first-class ticket anywhere in the world." She looked down at Clarissa, who was being dragged away, kicking and screaming. "Except her," Julianne added. She picked up her duffel bag from the floor where she had dropped it earlier. She looked at seat 1A, the seat she had paid for, the seat she had been kicked out of. "It's a nice seat," Julianne murmured to herself. "But I think I prefer to stand." She turned and walked off the plane, her head held high, leaving the chaos she had orchestrated in her wake. But the karma wasn't finished yet. The boardroom was waiting. The journey from the jet bridge to the Aerolux executive suite was a study in contrasts. For Julianne Vance, it was a return to her kingdom. She walked swiftly, flanked by Elias Thorne and her legal counsel, the concrete floors of the terminal clicking rhythmically beneath her sneakers. Gate agents stopped typing to stare. Baggage handlers paused. The airport grapevine was faster than fiber optics. The word was already out. The owner is in the building. For Nancy and Marcus, however, it was a funeral procession. They were stripped of their lanyards and ID badges at the gate. Escorted by 2 silent security officers, they walked 10 paces behind Julianne, heads low, avoiding the gaze of their colleagues. The humiliation was visceral. Nancy, who had spent 30 years terrorizing junior staff with uniform infractions, was now walking with her blazer unbuttoned and her mascara smudged, looking like a ghost. They were led not to the standard HR offices, but to the penthouse level, the glass aquarium. It was a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the tarmac. From here, you could see the entire operation, the fuel trucks, the baggage carts, the giant metal birds taxiing for takeoff. It was a view of absolute power. Julianne entered the room and didn't sit. She walked straight to the window, looking down at the plane she had just vacated. "Sit," Elias Thorne commanded. Nancy and Marcus collapsed into 2 leather chairs at the far end of the long mahogany table. They looked small in the vast room. Julianne turned around. She didn't yell. She didn't throw things. She simply unzipped her hoodie, revealing a simple black t-shirt underneath, and poured herself a glass of water from a crystal carafe. "Do you know why I bought this airline?" Julianne asked, her voice soft, almost conversational. Nancy swallowed hard, her throat clicking audibly. No, Miss Vance. I bought it because my father was a porter at this very airport for 40 years, Julianne said, pacing slowly along the length of the table. He was invisible. People walked past him, looked through him, treated him like furniture. When I took over, I made a promise that dignity would be the currency of Aerolux, not dollars. Dignity. She stopped directly in front of Marcus. The young man was shaking. "Marcus," Julianne said, "you saw the manifest. You saw my name. You knew Seat 1A was paid for. Why did you lie about the medical emergency?" Marcus looked at his hands. "Mrs. Whitmore. She's very persuasive. She said she would call Mr. Sterling. I was afraid of losing my job." "So, to save your job, you sold your integrity for a woman with a Chanel bag," Julianne noted dryly. "And you, Nancy?" Nancy straightened up, trying to summon a shred of her old authority. "Ms. Vance, with all due respect, I was managing a volatile situation. My job is conflict resolution. I made a judgment call to prioritize a platinum legacy flyer over an unknown passenger. It's standard practice to protect high-yield revenue streams." Julianne stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 seconds. Then Julianne laughed. It was a cold, humorless sound. "Revenue streams," Julianne repeated. "Nancy, bring up the screen." Elias dimmed the lights and pressed a button. A massive monitor on the wall flickered to life. It displayed Nancy's personnel file. "You have been with us for 30 years," Julianne read. "In that time, you have filed 42 complaints against passengers. 38 of them were against people of color. Did you think we didn't track that data?" Nancy's face went white. That's circumstantial. I enforce the rules." "You enforce your rules," Julianne corrected. "You looked at me, saw a black woman in a hoodie, and decided I was aggressive because I knew my rights. You weaponized the police against a paying customer. You threatened me with arrest." Julianne leaned forward, placing both hands on the table. "That isn't conflict resolution, Nancy. That is profiling, and it is a cancer in my company." Julianne turned to the general counsel, Robert. "What is the severance package for a lead purser with 30 years of tenure?" "Approximately $150,000 plus pension benefits," Robert recited without looking up. Nancy let out a breath she had been holding. She was being fired, yes, but at least she would have her money. She could retire. "However," Robert continued, "that applies only to termination without cause. In cases of gross misconduct, violation of federal aviation, non-discrimination laws, and falsifying incident reports." Robert closed the file. "The severance is 0. The pension is frozen, pending legal review." Nancy gasped, standing up. "You can't do that. I gave you my life." "You gave me liability," Julianne said coldly. "You are terminated effectively immediately. Security will escort you to your lockers to retrieve your personal effects. You have 20 minutes to vacate the premises." Nancy looked at Marcus. Marcus looked away. "And Marcus," Julianne said, "you're young. You followed orders, but you followed the wrong orders. You are suspended for 6 months without pay. You will attend mandatory retraining on bias and ethics. If you pass, you start again. At the bottom. Economy reserves. Probationary period." Marcus nodded frantically. Thank you, Miss Vance. I won't let you down." "Get them out of my sight," Julianne whispered. As the doors closed behind the disgraced crew, Julianne didn't celebrate. She rubbed her temples. The rot was deep. But the real problem wasn't the employees. It was the culture that empowered people like Clarissa Whitmore to think they owned the sky. "Robert," Julianne said, turning to the window. "Where is Mrs. Whitmore now?" "Airport police, holding cell." "Terminal 4, Robert replied. "She is demanding her one phone call." Julianne smiled grimly. "Let her make it. I want to see what happens when the queen bee realizes the hive has turned against her." The holding cell at JFK's airport police precinct was a stark contrast to the first-class cabin. It was a small, windowless room with cinder-block walls painted a depressing shade of beige. There was a metal bench bolted to the floor and a single, flickering fluorescent light that buzzed like a trapped fly. Clarissa Whitmore sat on the bench, her Chanel suit wrinkled, her mascara running. She wasn't crying from sadness. She was crying from pure, unadulterated rage. She had been fingerprinted. She had been told to surrender her phone, which she refused until they physically took it. She had been treated like a common criminal. "This is a lawsuit," she muttered to the empty room, her leg bouncing nervously. "I will own this airport. I will sue them for kidnapping. I will have that Julianne woman scrubbing floors by next week." The door buzzed and clicked open. A tired-looking police sergeant stepped in. He held her iPhone in a plastic bag. "One call," he grunted. "Make it quick. Your lawyer or your husband." "My husband!" Clarissa snapped, snatching the phone. "He's going to have your badge numbers, all of you." She dialed the number for Arthur Whitmore. Arthur was the senior partner at Sterling and Cooper, a man who feared nothing but a drop in stock prices. The phone rang, and rang, and rang. "Pick up, Arthur," she screamed. Finally, on the last ring, the line connected. "Clarissa." Arthur's voice sounded strange, tight, strained. "Arthur, thank God," Clarissa gushed, the relief flooding her voice. "You have to help me. It's a nightmare. I'm at JFK police station. Some crazy woman, she claims she owns the airline. She had me dragged off the plane. They cancelled the flight. You need to call Richard Sterling. Call the CEO. Get me out of here and sue them into oblivion." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence. "Arthur." "You idiot," Arthur whispered. The venom in his voice was so shocking, Clarissa almost dropped the phone. "Excuse me? I said you idiot," Arthur roared, the sound distorting the speaker. "Do you have any idea what you've done? Me? I'm the victim here. They made me switch seats for some—" "Shut up," Arthur screamed. "Just shut up! I just got off the phone with the General Counsel of Aerolux. Do you know who that woman was? That was Julianne Vance. She isn't just the CEO, Clarissa. She owns the holding company that keeps our firm alive." Clarissa felt a cold pit open in her stomach. "Well, so what? I'm your wife. She disrespected me." "She cancelled the contract, Clarissa." Arthur was hyperventilating now. $10 million a year. Gone. In 5 minutes. Because you couldn't sit in row 2? Because you had to humiliate the one person on the planet who signs our checks? I can fix this," Clarissa stammered, her arrogance crumbling into fear. "I'll apologize. I'll write a letter." "It's too late for letters," Arthur yelled. "And it's not just the contract. Have you checked the internet?" "No, of course you haven't. You're in a cell." "The internet?" "Someone on the plane recorded it, Clarissa. It's on Twitter. It's on TikTok. Racist Socialite versus CEO. It has 4 million views in an hour. You called her a demographic. You told her to know her place. It's everywhere." Clarissa's hand began to shake uncontrollably. "Arthur, please, I'm scared. Come get me." "Get you?" Arthur let out a bitter, cruel laugh. "The board of partners is meeting right now to discuss my position. They want me to resign. They say I'm a liability because of you. If I come down there, the press will be waiting. They'll photograph me with you." "Arthur, I'm your wife. You're an anchor around my neck," Arthur hissed. "I'm not coming, Clarissa. Call your own lawyer. Use your own money, if you have any left after the prenup hearings." "Prenup?" Clarissa whispered, tears streaming down her face. "Arthur, don't do this." "You did this," Arthur said. "Don't call this number again." The line went dead. Clarissa stared at the phone. The screen went black, reflecting her own terrified face. She was alone. The money was gone. Her status was gone. Her husband was gone. The sergeant opened the door. "Time's up. Lawyer on the way?" Clarissa didn't answer. She couldn't. Meanwhile, back in the executive suite, Julianne Vance was watching the same video Arthur had mentioned. It was shot from row 2. It showed Clarissa looming over Julianne, sneering, pointing her finger. It showed the quiet dignity of Julianne's response. Boycott racism was trending for one globally. Julianne Vance was trending Tumblr too. The official Aerolux account had just posted a simple statement. "We fly everyone. We respect everyone. Those who don't share these values will find other ways to travel." Julianne turned off the iPad. She felt exhausted, but lighter. "Ms. Vance?" Elias spoke from the doorway. "We have a situation at the gate." "More press?" Julianne asked. "No," Elias smiled slightly. "The passengers from Flight 404. They haven't left. They are refusing to board the replacement aircraft." Julianne frowned. "Why? Is there a mechanical issue?" "No, ma'am," Elias said. "They said they aren't leaving until they know you're okay. And I think they want to say thank you. Julianne stood up. She walked to the mirror and fixed her hair. She put her sunglasses back on. Well, she said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. It would be rude to keep them waiting. The walk from the executive suite to gate 12 felt longer than the walk from the plane had been, but the weight in Julianne's chest was lighter. She had expected to find a riot. Travelers are notoriously impatient. Delays usually breed hostility, and she had just grounded an entire flight for a personnel matter. She braced herself for shouting, for demands for compensation, for the ugly side of tired people wanting to go home. But as she rounded the corner, flanked by Elias Thorne and a fresh security detail, the noise at gate 12 wasn't anger. It was a low, buzzing hum of conversation that died down the moment she came into view. 150 passengers were waiting. They were sitting on the floor, leaning against the windows, or standing in small clusters. When they saw Julianne, the silence rippled through the crowd like a wave. Julianne stopped. She tightened her grip on her duffel bag. "I'm ready for the complaints, Elias," she whispered. But then, Bill, the heavy-set construction worker who had shared his tuna sandwich space with her, stood up. He looked out of place in the sleek terminal, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Hey!" Bill shouted, his voice booming. "It's her! It's the boss!" Slowly, awkwardly at first, then with growing enthusiasm, people began to clap. It wasn't the polite golf clap of a boardroom. It was the raucous, genuine applause of people who had just watched a bully get taken down. The young mother from seat 34C stood up, holding her sleeping toddler, and nodded at Julianne with tears in her eyes. The businessman from 1F, who had buried his face in his newspaper while Clarissa ranted, looked at Julianne with a mixture of shame and respect, offering a humble bow of his head. Julianne felt her throat constrict. She had spent years looking at spreadsheets, obsessing over profit margins and fuel costs. She had forgotten that the heart of her business was people. She walked to the podium at the gate desk. The gate agent, a young woman who looked terrified to be in the presence of the CEO, handed her the microphone with shaking hands. "Thank you," Julianne said, her voice echoing through the terminal. The applause died down. "I want to apologize again for the delay," Julianne began, "and for the display you had to witness earlier. At Aerolux, we promised to transport you safely, but today we failed to transport you with dignity. That stops now." "You showed her!" someone yelled from the back, causing a ripple of laughter. Julianne smiled. She showed herself. "But I want to make something right. You all saw something today that was ugly. I want to replace that memory with something better." She looked at the gate agent. "Is the new aircraft prepped?" "Yes, Ms. Vance. We are ready to board." "Good," Julianne said. "But before we do, I am making an executive change to the manifest." She pointed to the young mother, Elena. "Elena, come here, please." Elena walked forward, looking confused, clutching her baby. "You were sitting in 34C, Julianne said gently. "And you didn't complain once. You just wanted to comfort your son. That is the kind of grace I want in my cabin." Julianne took a boarding pass from the printer and handed it to Eleanor. "Seat 1A is vacant. It's yours." Eleanor's jaw dropped. "But isn't that your seat?" "Not today," Julianne said softly. "Today it's for someone who deserves the rest." The crowd cheered, but Julianne wasn't finished. "As for the rest of you," she continued, looking out at the sea of faces, "my assistant is currently emailing every single one of you a Vance Gold membership status. For life. You stuck by me when I was just a passenger in a hoodie. You treated me like a human being when the staff didn't. That loyalty means more to me than any ticket price." The terminal erupted. People were high-fiving. Bill looked like he had won the lottery. As the boarding call began, the atmosphere was electric. It wasn't just a flight anymore. It was a victory lap. Julianne waited until everyone had boarded. She walked down the jet bridge last. When she stepped onto the plane, the air was different. The crew, a new team, hurriedly assembled, but briefed on exactly who was on board, greeted her with genuine warmth, not fear. She walked past first class. She saw Elena in seat 1A, reclining the chair, her baby fast asleep in a bassinet, a glass of sparkling water in her hand. Elena looked up and mouthed, "Thank you." Julianne walked past business. She walked past premium economy. She found her way to the back. Seat 34B was empty. Bill, sitting in 34A, looked up and grinned. "You sit here again, boss?" "Best seat in the house, Bill," Julianne said, stowing her bag. "It keeps you grounded." As the plane taxied to the runway, leaving behind the chaos, the police cars and a ruined socialite in a holding cell, Julianne Vance looked out the window. She took a picture of the clouds. It was the first time in years she truly loved flying. Karma had been served, but more importantly, a lesson had been learned. Status isn't about where you sit. It's about how you stand. And that is how the mighty fall. Clarissa Whitmore woke up that morning, thinking her money and her husband's name gave her the right to belittle anyone she pleased. She went to sleep that night in a jail cell, with no husband, no reputation, and a lifetime ban from the skies. Julianne Vance proved that true power doesn't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes it sits quietly in the middle seat, waiting for the right moment to stand up. It's a reminder to all of us. Treat the janitor with the same respect as the CEO, because you never know who you're really talking to. If you loved this story of instant karma and justice, make sure to hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. What would you have done if you were Julianne? Would you have fired them on the spot, or waited? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.